Imagine receiving a letter detailing this agonizing trial you just survived.
Like a really intense, deeply personal ordeal.
Right, exactly. So it has every emotional toll, every single intense argument, even the exact final resolution of the whole thing.
Which would be shocking enough to read.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But then you look at the top of the page and you notice the postmark is from a decade ago.
Yeah, that's just wild to even think about.
Right. But in 18th century Jewish mysticism, this actually happened.
Yeah, it's a documented historical anomaly.
And, the easy instinct here is just to write this off as, like, religious folklore, or maybe just a neat magic trick.
Sure, just some mystical legend.
Exactly. But our deep dive today into Rabbi Shlomo Ezagui's writing, Spiritual Gravity and the Physics of Chassidic Time, it suggests something entirely different.
Which is what makes this so incredibly fascinating.
Yeah. Because we're going to look at this anomaly not through the lens of magic, but through the hard mathematical mechanics of modern astrophysics and Einstein's theories of relativity.
It is a fascinating intersection, really, because we usually treat the profound spiritual insights of the mystics, and the strict laws of physics as completely incompatible.
Right, like they belong in totally different worlds.
Exactly. Completely different frameworks. But when you examine the core narrative of this letter, the language used by the 18th century mystics to describe their experience, it actually maps almost perfectly onto the language 20th century physicists use.
Which is just crazy.
It really is. It maps right onto how physicists describe the warping of space-time. But to understand that overlap, we really need to look at the specific details of the event itself.
Okay, yeah. So the narrative centers on two massive figures in Jewish history. First, you have the Baal Shem Tov.
Right, a hugely important figure.
Yeah, he lived from 1698 to 1760, and he actually founded the Chassidic movement, which is a movement heavily focused on joy, the omnipresence of God, and spiritual intentionality.
And then on the other hand, you have his brother-in-law, Rabbi Gershon Kittover.
Right, who was known more as like a rigorous, very traditional scholar.
Exactly, a much more conventional, strict figure in that world.
So the source text describes a letter the Baal Shem Tov wrote to Rabbi Gershon documenting this visionary experience.
And it wasn't just a simple dream.
No, not at all. The Baal Shem Tov claimed his soul ascended to the upper spiritual worlds, where he literally stumbled upon a heavenly court actively prosecuting Rabbi Gershon.
And the charges were severe. Extremely severe.
Yeah, life or death severe, right?
Yes. The heavenly court was preparing to issue a death sentence because Rabbi Gershon had deeply disrespected the head of his local rabbinical court.
Wow. Just for disrespect.
Well, in this theological framework, fracturing communal harmony or disrespecting a spiritual leader, it creates a massive rupture in the world. It's a huge deal, which invited this severe decree.
Okay, that makes sense in that context.
So the Baal Shem Tov, seeing this unfolding, rushed to the spiritual gates of the court to intervene. But he found the doors physically barred to him by angels.
Which is so intense. My first assumption reading that was that the locked doors signify like a final verdict.
Right, like the trial is over.
Yeah, where the usual channels of appeal are just completely closed. But instead of accepting the bureaucratic lockout, he bypasses the court entirely.
He just goes right over their heads.
Exactly. He stands outside the doors and appeals directly to the highest possible authority, crying out that whatever disrespect Rabbi Gershon showed, it wasn't born of malice.
He argued it was out of a pure, albeit misguided, zeal to defend the honor of the Almighty.
And that direct appeal actually worked.
It did.
Mm-hmm.
A heavenly voice echoed through those spiritual chambers, confirming his defense, stating that Rabbi Gershon was indeed acting out of jealousy for the Lord of Hosts.
So the death sentence was just canceled.
It was immediately canceled. However, the spiritual mechanics of this court required that the rupture Gershon caused still needed to be, balanced out.
Right, actions have consequences.
Exactly. So the decree of death was converted into a decree of blindness for exactly 1 month.
Which makes perfect sense when you look at Talmudic law.
It really does.
Because there is a well-established legal principle that a blind person is considered as if they were dead.
Right. It's a very specific legal equivalency.
Yeah. It isn't just about a physical handicap. It's a profound detachment from the visual material world. By experiencing a month of total darkness, he is severed from the world of action and sight.
Which effectively satisfies the spiritual requirement of the death decree without him actually losing his life.
Okay, so then years pass, and the two men finally meet in person.
Right, back in the physical world.
Yeah. Rabbi Gershon confirms the contents of the letter. He admits the bitter argument with the head of the rabbinical court happened in the physical world exactly as the Baal Shem Tov had seen it in his vision.
And he had indeed suffered that exact month of blindness.
Right. But then he raises the paradox that anchors this entire deep dive.
This is the real mystery.
Yeah. The date on the letter from the Baal Shem Tov was written years before the actual earthly argument ever took place.
Right. So Gershon asks the obvious question. How can you document a memory of a trial that hasn't happened yet?
And the Baal Shem Tov's answer is what really caught my attention. Because he doesn't say, God showed me the future.
No, he doesn't use that kind of prophetic language at all.
Right. He offers a mechanical explanation. He explains that in the higher spiritual worlds, 10 or 15 years of human history are gathered up, bundled together, and experienced in one single compressed shot.
He basically describes a vantage point where a decade of sequential events is visible in a single instant.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we take his explanation literally, bundling a decade into a single shot is, well, it's a literal description of time compression.
Yes, exactly.
So if the Baal Shem Tov is actually experiencing compressed time, we have to ask if that is scientifically possible.
And modern physics unequivocally says yes.
Right. We already know from Albert Einstein's theory of relativity that time is not some rigid, universal master clock ticking at the exact same speed for everyone. Time is a flexible fabric.
It is entirely malleable. Einstein demonstrated that the passage of time is relative to the observer, and it can be warped by two primary factors, which are velocity and gravity.
Okay, speed and gravity.
Right, and we've proven this countless times since the mid-20th century using highly calibrated atomic clocks.
Right, the atomic clock experiments.
Exactly. If you place one atomic clock at sea level, deep in Earth's gravity well, and another at the peak of a mountain where the gravitational pull is slightly weaker, the clock at sea level will actually tick slower.
Wow, so gravity literally slows time down.
It does. The intense gravity stretches the fabric of space-time.
It's the same with velocity, right? Like an atomic clock on a commercial jet ticks slower than a synchronized clock sitting motionless on the tarmac.
Exactly. Now, for the average person, the microscopic differences are unnoticeable. Your personal clock ticks a tiny bit faster living in the mountains of Colorado than it does in a valley below sea level like Death Valley.
But we just don't feel it in our daily lives.
Right, it's too small. But when you push the math to the extreme, the results are staggering. We are all familiar with the classic sci-fi spaceship thought experiment.
Oh yeah, the one where you travel close to the speed of light.
Yes. If you accelerate a spaceship to 99.5% the speed of light, the traveler's perception of time remains completely normal to them.
So to the person on the ship, everything is fine.
Right. Their heart rate, their thoughts, the ticking of their wristwatch, all of it feels perfectly standard inside the cabin of that ship.
But relative to the people observing from Earth, the traveler's clock is ticking incredibly slowly.
Exactly. If the traveler spends what feels to them like 1 year flying at that speed, they will return to Earth to find that 10 years have passed for everyone else.
I find the usual metaphors for this a bit lacking. It isn't just like watching a video on fast forward.
No, it's a physical distortion.
Right. A better way to visualize how space-time warps, I think, is to imagine the difference between walking through empty air versus trying to walk through a pool of really thick water.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, the water represents dense gravity or extreme velocity. It offers resistance. It literally slows down your progress through the dimension of time.
Right.
So if you are in the dense water moving slowly and someone else is walking freely on the dry pool deck, they are going to cover far more chronological distance than you do in the same period.
That physical mechanism of resistance is the perfect bridge to Rabbi Ezagui's analysis, because physics dictates a fundamental rule.
Which is?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, two clocks cannot move at different speeds if they share the exact same reference frame.
Ah, okay.
So if the Baal Shem Tov experienced a bundled decade in a brief moment, while Rabbi Gershon lived through those 10 years day by day, they could not have been occupying the same gravitational reference frame.
So what does this all mean for a mystic in the 1700s who definitely didn't have a spaceship?
Well, it requires us to map the physical laws of relativity onto human consciousness.
Right. How does a person alter their reference frame without a spaceship or a black hole?
The source text introduces this fascinating concept of spiritual gravity. If physical gravity is created by mass, the concentration of matter, then spiritual gravity must be created by spiritual mass.
And what exactly is spiritual mass?
In the framework of Chassidic philosophy, Spiritual mass is ego.
Oh, wow. Ego is mass.
Yes. It is the heavy, dense accumulation of self-importance. When a person is deeply entrenched in the material world, their focus is entirely localized on their own physical needs. My property, my desires, my status, my survival.
It's all about me.
Exactly. And this intense self-focus acts as a gravitational anchor, pinning human consciousness firmly into the slow, dense, linear progression of physical space-time.
So the ego literally weighs you down. It makes your consciousness heavy.
Yes, precisely.
Okay.
Conversely, a tzaddik, a perfectly righteous individual, spends their life systematically dismantling that ego.
By letting go of all those selfish desires.
Right, by redirecting their focus away from selfish material desires and entirely toward the divine will, they become transparent. They shed their spiritual density.
And if you have less mass, you exert less gravitational pull.
Exactly. By elevating his spiritual state, the Baal Shem Tov effectively reduced his spiritual gravity, pulling himself out of the dense, slow-moving pool of our material reference frame and stepping onto the dry deck.
The implication there is just profound.
It really is.
Just as physical time flows faster where physical gravity is weaker, spiritual time compresses when spiritual gravity is lifted.
Yes.
From that later, higher vantage point, the chronological constraints of the physical world just fall away. But, for this to be more than just a neat philosophical parallel, there needs to be evidence that these mystics actually perceive reality outside of the standard material frame.
And the source text provides exactly that evidence by describing how the Baal Shem Tov interacted with the natural world.
Right, how he actually saw things.
Yeah. When he looked at a physical object like a stone wall or a tree, he did not perceive the heavy, dense matter that we see. The text states he saw the 10 utterances of creation vibrating within them.
I want to pause and define that real quick because it's easy to misinterpret that as some kind of simulated reality or matrix code.
Right. It's not the Matrix.
Yeah. In Jewish mysticism, the 10 utterances refer to the specific spoken phrases from the book of Genesis, such as, "Let there be light," that God used to speak the universe into existence.
And mysticism argues those utterances were not one-time historical events that just happened thousands of years ago.
They're ongoing.
Yes, they are continuous, active streams of divine creative energy.
Yeah.
And the Baal Shem Tov actually perceived that continuous stream.
He could see the energy itself.
He saw the divine blueprint maintaining the existence of the object from microsecond to microsecond. He taught that if ordinary human eyes were suddenly permitted to see this constant flow of spiritual vitality, the physical tangibility of matter, the wood, the stone, the water, it would completely vanish from our sight.
So the physical shell is only visible because our heavy ego forces us to perceive density?
Exactly.
When you strip the ego away, the physical mass disappears, leaving only the sustaining energy.
There is a really striking historical account from late 1812 that perfectly illustrates this cognitive shift.
Oh, the story with the Alter Rebbe.
Yes, Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi, another monumental figure in Chassidic history. He was actively fleeing the advancing armies of Napoleon.
Which is a terrifying, highly physical threat.
Unbelievably terrifying. It was the dead of winter, he was physically exhausted, and he was nearing the end of his life. But despite the overwhelming physical threat of war and the harsh environment, he was entirely unmoored from physical anxiety.
He wasn't trapped in that panic.
Right. He asked his grandson, the Chassidic, to describe what he saw in the room. His grandson looked around and gave a perfectly normal, materially grounded answer. He said, "I see the ceiling, the wall, and the wooden beams."
Which is a response from someone securely anchored in the standard reference frame of human survival and physical reality.
Exactly. But the Alter Rebbe responded, "I no longer see the wood or the ceiling. I see only the divine life force, the Word of God, that is constantly creating them out of nothingness." Yeah. Even while his physical body was failing and armies were literally marching, his consciousness had completely escaped the dense material frame. The physical threat simply did not register as primary reality anymore.
Synthesizing this with the Baal Shem Tov's letter is, I think, the major realization of this deep dive. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Baal Shem Tov wasn't a psychic.
No, not at all.
He wasn't gazing into a crystal ball to predict some fixed future. By systematically shedding his ego and his attachment to material mass, his spiritual gravity became incredibly low.
Right, he shed the weight.
Yeah. This allowed his consciousness to ascend into a reference frame where the heavy, sequential timeline of Earth is compressed. He stepped into a reality where the future had, from his new vantage point, already occurred.
It's perfectly stated.
He witnessed the trial, defended his brother-in-law, and wrote the letter, all while standing outside the gravitational drag of our present moment.
He basically utilized the mechanics of relativity through a spiritual medium. He accelerated his consciousness out of the local space-time, experienced the bundled decade, and brought that data back to the heavy, slow timeline of 18th century Europe.
You know, I initially thought a story like this was intended merely to prove the superhuman status of a specific religious founder, like a superpower reserved exclusively for a 1700s mystic.
A lot of people read it that way.
Right, but the source text actually argues that this capability is a universal human trait.
Yes. What's fascinating here is that the text leans heavily on a verse from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 60, verse 21, which states, "Your people are all tzaddikim."
Meaning everyone has that potential.
Exactly. The Chassidic interpretation of this is that the potential for profound righteousness, and therefore the potential to shed spiritual gravity, is embedded within the DNA of every single human soul.
So if spiritual gravity is tied to our local physical bodies and our ego, then lowering that gravity means our consciousness must be tapping into something non-local. We are interacting with reality outside the boundaries of our physical location, which honestly sounds remarkably like the principles of quantum mechanics.
It absolutely does. The text draws a direct line between this spiritual potential and the microscopic reality of quantum physics.
How so?
Well, at the absolute smallest levels of matter, the strict rules of classical physics, where objects are isolated and time flows in one direction, completely disintegrate. Science demonstrates this clearly through the phenomenon of quantum entanglement.
Right, quantum entanglement. That's where two particles can become so deeply linked that a change in the state of one instantly triggers a change in the other, regardless of the physical distance between them.
Yes.
Like, they could be on opposite sides of the observable universe, and the reaction is instantaneous.
Exactly. And it was a discovery that deeply unsettled early physicists. Einstein famously derided it as spooky action at a distance.
Yeah, because it violated his whole rule about the speed of light.
Right. He believed nothing could communicate faster than the speed of light. But quantum entanglement proved that at a foundational level, the universe operates on non-locality.
So space and time are just illusions?
They might actually be emergent properties illusions created by our macro-level perspective, while the underlying reality is one of unbroken, instantaneous connection.
And for the mystic, this isn't spooky at all.
Not in the slightest.
It is the mathematical confirmation of their core theology. If the human brain is constructed of entangled quantum particles, and our consciousness is somehow interacting with those fields, then letting go of the localized ego is the key.
Yes, letting go of that ego is everything.
By choosing a life of spiritual intentionality, by prioritizing empathy, unselfishness, and connection over material greed, we aren't just adopting a nice moral code.
We are actively stripping away the illusion of our physical isolation.
Exactly. We are allowing our consciousness to resonate with that non-local underlying reality of the quantum field.
The ultimate takeaway from Rabbi Ezagui's writing is that science and mysticism are not engaged in some zero-sum conflict.
They're not fighting each other.
No, they are simply two distinct vocabularies trying to articulate the exact same underlying mechanics of the universe.
Yeah, astrophysics uses the language of mass, gravity, and relativity to describe the behavior of planets and clocks.
And mysticism uses the language of ego, spiritual gravity, and divine light to describe the behavior of human consciousness.
But both disciplines conclude that our perception of linear time and physical separation is an illusion created by density.
Which is a beautiful synergy.
It really is, and it radically changes how you view daily life. Every time you obsess over a perceived slight or hoard material wealth or isolate yourself in selfishness, you are actively increasing your mass.
You're making yourself heavier.
Right. You are pulling the heavy blanket of linear time tighter around yourself. But every time you act with profound unselfishness, you lighten your load in the fabric of space-time.
You are quite literally altering your interaction with the universe at a mechanical level.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to consider as we wrap up. If letting go of the ego reduces your spiritual mass and alters how you perceive the flow of time, think about the moments in your own life when you have experienced a profound flow state.
Oh, that's an interesting connection.
Yeah, consider the times you have been completely absorbed in creating a piece of art, or laughing uncontrollably with your family, or maybe sitting in deep, quiet meditation.
Those moments where you just lose yourself.
Exactly. In those moments, your sense of self-importance vanishes. And remarkably, in those exact same moments, time seems to completely evaporate. Hours pass in what feels like seconds.
It's so true.
We usually dismiss that as a psychological quirk, just our brains being distracted. But given the mechanics we've explored today, what if it isn't just a mental trick? What if, in those rare moments of pure, unselfish connection, you have temporarily shed your spiritual gravity?
That is a profound possibility.
What if you have actually physically shifted your reference frame, stepping out of the dense water of linear time and touching the edges of a reality where the past, present, and future are bundled into a single shot? The next time you find yourself entirely lost in a beautiful moment, pay attention. You might be experiencing the exact same mechanics that allowed a mystic to read a letter from the future.